Would you be willing to kill 3 people to save the world? This is the analysis of Demon 79, another chapter of the Black Mirror series. This is the story of Nida, a migrant who lives in England and works in a department store. Nida, like many people who work the same job as her, goes in every day, gets paid at the store, waits for customers, serves them in a very affectionate way, takes her 5 minutes to eat something on her break, then comes back, works the rest of the day, and goes home to watch TV and sleep. Obviously, you have to put a little bit of context to the fact that Nida is a migrant living in England. She is clearly of Indian origin as well as her name. Her appearance also clearly describes it, and this is perceived in the way she is treated by her co-workers, her bosses, and people in the street. Being a migrant in England at this historical moment is something that is experienced as a burden. When she takes her lunch break, she is eating Indian food. Definitely something like curry, something very aromatic, and this aroma bothers her co-worker, Vicky, who is a despicable person. Since these little conflicts are going on, Nida has like fantasies of violence where she crashes her co-worker against the glass or treats a customer badly because she has a nefarious history of violence behind her, but Nida has all this repressed violence and she just shuts up and tries to fit in as best she can. On the contrary, Vicky, who doesn't like the way Nida's food smells, goes and tells on her to the boss and complains to him. The next day, the boss comes in and says, hey, maybe you could do us a favor. Could you eat normal food? Like there is such a thing as normal food, right? And he says, maybe a ham and cheese sandwich. And he says, I have a brilliant idea. Why don't you go eat in the cellar, in the basement? While in the basement, she sees a small drawer and some old pictures of a person who used to use that place. And when she opens the drawer, she cuts her finger a little bit, opens the drawer and takes out a small piece of dominoes and stains this piece of dominoes with his blood. In the night, she realizes that the stone he had touched and stained it with his blood was really a rune. In this case, this rune invoked the demon Gap, who first reveals himself in front of Nida as a demon with horns with a skull head and so on. I just want to add the parenthesis that the Gap demon really is canonical. That is, there is documentation and literature about such a demon, and it is a demon that is associated with the seduction of women, the production of love, and the relationship with fertility. So it's not randomly selected. I think it really has an interesting role in this story. The demon, so as not to scare Nida too much, is transformed into a television character, a member of a musical group that sings the Rasputin song. This also does not seem coincidental to me, given that Rasputin's song and the figure of Rasputin is a highly mystical figure of a gigantic character, Russian, who was supposedly emotionally involved with Queen England and whose genitals broke records for their size. So, already from the context of the Gap demon linked to fertility, Rasputin, who was supposedly the lover of Queen England, and this woman who is seen as seduced by the Gap demon, there is something aligning that looks fatherly. Anyway, this demon reveals himself to Nida and says, hey, you activated me because you stained my rune with your blood and now you were chosen to perform this ritual. You have the ability to save the world and to save the world. In 3 days, you have to kill 3 people. Nida is faced with this reality and she simply has to make the decision and see if she is able to kill 1 person per day in 3 days, otherwise the whole world will end. The thing is that Nida, escaping from the demon, finds herself under a bridge and a person comes up to her as if to ask for help and sees that she is talking to no one, because obviously no one else can see the demon but Nida. So this guy with his little dog comes up to offer help and Nida says, no, don't mess with me. And the demon tells her he's a very good first victim. In fact, if you knew, he's a child molester. And he grabs Nida's head and teaches him, through his powers, everything bad that the other man is. And Nida then quickly loses control, grabs a brick off the floor, hits him in the head, and delivers her first victim. We take 1 person killed out of 3 needed to save the world. The next day, Nida feels horrible, lousy about herself. She is full of remorse, but at the same time, the demon is also trying to comfort her. And he says to her, hey, if you only knew, one of his victims is going to commit suicide at 28 for everything he did to her. But now that you killed him, you changed that person's life, you saved her. So it's not so bad to kill a person because you're saving his potential victims. Then Nida says, okay, I'm going to get some courage and I'm going to find my second victim. So she goes to a bar to drink and says, well, bars are the places where the worst scum in town hang out. In this bar, she meets a person who had been her customer at the store, who was supposedly a man who had killed his wife. So she says, perfect. This is the excellent candidate to be my second victim. She follows him to an alley behind the bar, talks to him a little bit. They sort of go to his apartment together. He takes her to his apartment. They're talking in the apartment in a sort of misunderstanding that they were actually going to have sex while Nida was planning to kill him, and the demon gives her advice on what weapon to use and how to hide the body and so on. But something very strange happens there. First he says, you can't kill him. It wouldn't count his soul because he already killed someone. So his soul doesn't add up anymore. I mean, His soul is already condemned, it's useless to kill him. And just at that moment when Nida has the opportunity, but she realizes that taking his life would mean nothing to her goal, his brother who lives in the same apartment as him appears. And the brother obviously tries to call the police on him, gets very rowdy, they struggle, and Nida just at 11:58 at night, before the end of the day, kills the brother of the person she was originally going to kill. And she manages to accomplish her second victim in 2 days. There's a couple of scenes while all this killing and demon and saving the world stuff is going on, where there's a politician who's demonstrating in front of the store where Nida works. And it's a politician who talks first about the fear of migrants, the fact that migrants come to steal jobs, which is a narrative that hasn't aged at all, it's still quite valid. And secondly, a politician who talks about deregulating the welfare state and producing more heavy-handedness on the part of the state so that the country doesn't get screwed, as he puts it exactly. The thing is that Nida feels all this discrimination, this xenophobia, this racism. She feels all this in a contextual way, and she really realizes that this politician would be a great third victim. Moreover, she asks the demon to tell her more about his life, and the demon reveals what about. Hey, not only is this guy not only bad right now and a bully and a lousy person, but when he becomes president, he's probably going to be a dictator. A dictator like they had in Germany during World War II. So, Nida makes up his mind, I want to kill him. Here, interestingly, the demon tells him, hey, maybe you should find someone else, right? Like the people from below, the administration, the demons from hell, are not going to like it if you kill him. Because this politician, in fact, is very much on our side. We like him very much. I mean, it's nowhere that you can't kill him, but maybe you wouldn't like to pick somebody else. You might as well kill your co-worker, who was the xenophobic racist that caused you so much trouble in the beginning. But Nida is determined that she really wants to kill him. The last scene of this chapter, she is chasing him in her car. In fact, she tells the demon to butt out already, she wants to end this alone. She causes the politician to have an accident in his car. They both get out, she is about to kill him, and at that moment a policeman arrives and stops her. And she kind of loses her will, she loses her strength and says, I can't do this anymore. They take her to a hospital, she is locked up in the hospital. Midnight comes, they are interviewing her. The demon arrives and says, hey, we didn't make it. It's midnight of the third day, you only killed 2 people, we have 1 person left to kill. And so the world is going to end, it's going to start all over again. And me and you are going to be banished to the infinite void of nothingness. So she says, well, I'm going with you and the devil. They hold hands, walk down the hallway as the Third World War begins. What is Demon 17 and 9 about? That evil exists. And that with small actions you can prevent a greater evil. There are very bad people, there are terrible things like nuclear war, there are terrible things in the world. But if you kill 3 innocent people, things will continue to be fine. It's like if we say there is the climate catastrophe and there are 10 companies that are responsible for 70% of the pollution of the seas, of the common good and goodwill. You have to make small sacrifices and sully your virtue and your morals and your dignity in order to save the world. These small actions are what count. And aside also here what they put on us, obviously if you look at it, is the ugly, horrible utilitarian calculus. Which is, you kill 3 innocent people to save the world. And do we want to live in that world? And also what I find extremely interesting is that they put it in the political background of the rise of neoliberalism. And neoliberal logic tends to be extremely utilitarian, where it is increasingly normal to sacrifice innocence in the name of the greater good. And the fact that this is literally sold to us by a demon, the devil, also speaks of the metaphysical and ideological connotation that these discourses often have. Because utilitarianism is not as easy and simple to understand as simply, this war is justified, or killing this person is justified by a greater good or a common good. But we don't really understand how a lot of these things work. So if you look here, she had to choose to kill 3 people. And one of the people she chose to kill, she was going to save a lot of people. But that one, who was the politician? They didn't want to kill that politician. They wanted to protect that politician. So it is a utilitarian logic that never really ends up being completely utilitarian. Because if that were the way things were, then the decisions we would have to make would have been very drastic. To assume a utilitarian ethic, a utilitarian morality, would have repercussions that I don't think we can even measure. Like, for example, the repugnant argument. The disgusting argument is a premise that says that it's preferable to have a lot of people living with a lower quality of life, rather than a few people living with a higher quality of life. But under that argument, you would rather have hundreds of millions of people living in abject poverty than a smaller group of people living with a good quality of life. So no, it is not a problem of resource management. It is not a problem of utilitarian logic. On the contrary, the utilitarian Christian logic is used falsified, half-baked, disguised in metaphysics, hidden behind theological arguments to justify many of the most repugnant actions taken today. I love this episode because in addition to being contextually at the break of the birth of neoliberalism, it is also completely riddled with both theological and ideological symbolism. So it is important to reflect on how much we have been sold this idea that many times doing evil is justified by a greater good. And how many times are we not forced to take responsibility for those decisions by being promised a greater good? How many times have you put up with things or had to commit things that you would not do for the promise of participating in a greater good? We must be careful because the devil disguises himself on just what seems to us more pleasing to the eye. And he convinces us and talks nice to us, and in the end what he offers us in return is very little.